I think the intention of this session is to ensure that you get as broad a range as possible to see the different kinds of academic OSPOs and how they operate and how they came to be and what are the things that enable each institution to focus in on the points and the pieces that really work in the context of that institution. So as noted, I'm Bill Branan. I'm at Johns Hopkins University. And I really wanted to start with what the mission of the OSPO within Johns Hopkins is focused on. That's not to say that this is the only things that we do, but we really look at awareness as an understanding point where I think Kate mentioned in the last session that there's a lot of missed opportunities in the academic space because not everyone knows what's happening in the academic world around, and specifically within an institution, what open source is being worked on, what's being developed, what is being created, what is being shipped out, what is being used internally. So our starting point for ensuring that people know what open source is, how it works, why it's being included within the institution, how you can work together, and how people outside of the institution can be aware of and know what is happening and engage with the work that's happening within Johns Hopkins. Second point being guidance. There's a lot of people working on software, and not all of them have a background in software development. Most, in fact, are not engineering folks, and they come to software because they need it to accomplish the research goals or the teaching goals or other initiatives that they have within their institution. So providing some guidance around what's the approach that works well for open source, how do you make open source work well, starting at a very simple level around what kinds of licenses you should be applying a license, what kinds of licenses should you use, what are the things that you can do to build community with open source, how do you use the open source principles, even if you're not open source at the moment. So we have a lot of research projects that are not ready to open source, but they would like to use the strategies of the open source world to be able to understand how they can work better in the current environment and also prepare for the coming environment. The other part of it in terms of our mission is really a support role. So finding the way that the OSPO can provide guidance and training and connection points so that people who are doing software work but don't have the skills or don't have the knowledge or don't have the connections within the university or external to the university around perhaps engineering, perhaps specific scientific knowledge, that they don't know where to go for that. And so that's a point where the OSPO can be a central point of connection for folks within and around the university. Our OSPO is quite small, and I think you'll find that academic OSPOs are, at this point, small groups. We have 3 staff, myself, and Megan Forbes is our program manager, and she's the only one of these 3 that is actually full-time. And we have a graduate assistant, Joy, who is just doing a lot of on-the-ground work with us around understanding what's happening within the institution and providing guidance and best practices outside. So our OSPO is 3 people, but we sit within the context of a larger group called the Digital Research and Curation Center, which is an engineering team that allows us to pull from that group that's currently doing software, currently writing open source software, and has a history of engaging with open source and working within open source. I also oversee this group, so I'm able to pull people in to work in the OSPO and do OSPO work. But we sit within the libraries at JHU, so we're in a position to be able to leverage the other values of the libraries, but also leverage the other folks who do outreach, who do work with disciplines across the university to ensure that there is plenty of people that we're engaging with as we do our work. And there's only a certain amount that we can do with the staff that we have. So really the point of the OSPO is a connection. And we want to make sure that the work that we're doing allows us to have the greatest impact. And the only way we can do that is by working with a large group of other folks within the institution. So I'm just going to pop up some of the other parts of the institution that we currently engage with. And it's really an important point that the OSPO is able to make connections in large part or in small part to ensure that the work of open source is not just within libraries or within the engineering school, that it's really all over the place. So I have some examples that I'm going to fly through very quickly around what it means to do awareness, guidance, and support, which is our core mission. The first of those is our open source catalog. So just making this directly visible, what is open source that's happening within the institution. We have also a GitHub Enterprise, so thinking about our guidance. So we manage this. We have over 2,000 repositories that are in that at the moment. That's a continually building engagement. But you'll notice at the bottom, over 1,300 of those currently don't have licenses. And you could point at that and say, like, well, that's terrible. Why, what's going on? But it's really an opportunity to enable people to understand what's the purpose of this. Why should I even have a license on a repository? Why is that important? So there's a guidance role here that just helps people to understand why. Is still on? Oh, all right, it came back. And why is it important for us to engage with someone like the OSPO? So this is a quick note just about licensing specifically. You can see right now the Apache and MIT licenses are the two primary ones within the repositories, but we also have a bunch of other licenses that are engaged. There's a lot of conversation that happens around how licensing works. So the one thing that I'd love to talk about, don't have time to at the moment, we're just starting a new initiative called the Research Software Support Network to bring institutional support around open source and software development in general together into one place, so that anyone who's doing software, whether they're a researcher or just someone who's writing software for some other purpose, has a place to go to find the resources that they need in order to do the work that they're trying to do. So I'll leave it there and hand off to who's next. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. And a disclaimer here. If you see anything controversial, please raise your hand and we can talk about it later on. So my name is Jacek. I come from University of Luxembourg, and I need to give you a little bit of a context because it's kind of a special beast there. So Luxembourg is a very small state in the center of Europe. We have a very young university, it's not even 25 years old, about 7,500 students, super international. So every nation almost in the world is present there on the campus. And we primarily focus ourselves on kind of research activities. Of course, there's education, but those research activities are linked to the three areas: sustainable development, digitalization, digital transformation, health and medicine. And I work at the TTO of one of the ICT centers called the SNT. So the SNT mission is doing research in a collaborative model with the companies, with public actors, different, we call them partners, which is a bit different from a traditional research setup where the researchers are kind of left alone in the ivory tower and they kind of try to develop something and then find maybe an application later on, and or just send it up to the TTO and you guys take care of that. So this is kind of flipped situation here where we're trying to identify right partners with right technical challenge which fits our scientific expertise, where we can apply some long research, high risk research projects with those entities, where we can develop foundation for future technologies and applications. So, just conscious of time, one important part that we focus not on everything, but on those 4 strategic areas that are relevant for the government in Luxembourg. So that's, of course, financial industry, cybersecurity. There's high ambitions in the space sector, telecommunications, and autonomous system, which is like kind of a pot where you fit everything that is not fitting the first three. But that's important because it's directly driven by the digital and research strategy of the state. I mentioned before, partnership program is focusing primarily on applied type of research project with companies or other public actors, but we don't do higher TRL usually solutions. We focus mid-TRL to develop some prototypes to validate science and generate the knowledge. And now we come to the OSPO and open source. And again, a disclaimer, I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a lawyer. I had to learn that the hard way to try help people do, what should we do? So that's our mission. What do? Is we try to support proper use and deployment of FOSS across our research activities. So we don't have, our policy doesn't say you have to open everything because it's public institution or public funds. We don't tell, oh, you can't do that because this and that. Instead, of course, the PIs needs to be conscious about certain consequences, so we try to guide them to do this properly to achieve simply a better impact. And that's it. That's full. Our FOSS policy right now is just that slide. So I just very quickly wanted to come up to summarize our experiences, what happens in this specific setting where you work with companies. So usually what the company wants is to have some sort of security on the investment. So they want to see tangible assets. They want to have a control over IP. They want to have that long, high-risk strategic project somehow predictable. And it's very conflicting on the other side because there's academic freedom. IP, what is IP? We don't care. You know, the kind of traditional issues the academics have. Some are more aware, some are still not getting the whole point. So because also, we don't want to have commitments, right? So we want to do free research. I don't necessarily need to commit to deliver anything from an R&D project, but they want money, right? So this is kind of a first reflection, you know, what are the dynamics between the expectations. So just one, maybe very quickly, use case. What went wrong in such a partnership case? Just one example is that there was a mismatch of this interest because no one at the beginning of the project asked a question, what's your position on open source? Okay. And what happened is that partner invests a lot of money. There is a active communication. At the end of the project, there is the prototype ready, PhD, near completion. But we do our SEA and we see that, okay, we have some open source in it, and we will need to follow the license requirements. But then the partner wants to test that. And they say, okay, like we can't use GPL because it's against our business and our policy here. So there is no time for any correction or redevelopment of this. That was a core component. As a result, we lose this funding opportunity on opportunity of collaborative research. So if only we would match those expectations about open source in due time at the beginning of the project, not at the end, that would end up better. So very quickly, another case where the observation, the company usually has, in our experience, no position on open source actually, or they say, we don't want to use that because we don't know what it is, and it means that we're going to now lose our business opportunities because everything is open. And it's very hard to have that discussion because, again, people don't know and they don't want to admit that they don't know. And there is kind of like this legal standoff. So, okay, we're going to talk to our legals. The legals will push this back to business. And in the end, there is no a single point of contact to answer your questions about what's the IP or FOSS strategy we should apply for this collaboration. And there is this myth that open source will directly support their competition. I'll just move on. I just got a note. Lack of internal awareness. This is something that we try to address. There are definitely way more complex consideration for the researchers than just clicking public, right? So on your code. In this specific setting of collaborative research, we need to go through all the way, what is the purpose of the release? What is against which license we are checking that? Is our funding scheme allowing that contractual framework? Do we have any limitations there to use open source or not? And then what is the business or IP impact of that decision? And only then we come to the license compatibility and license selection before even preparing a deployment package and doing a release. So this is what usually researchers, they don't think about, that it might matter to help their research be better applied and across the board. That's another, I'm gonna stop. You can find some more examples in the slide there. But one last point is that where we try to assess, because again, like Bill, we have only 3 people, 2 of them are external. I need to pick my battles. I can't do a FOSS check for every single asset that comes my way. So we kind of try to apply this kind of risk-based approach where I know this is mandatory and this is where I will have most impact. So for strategic partnerships or high legal risk exposure, dual use defense, all that is picking up right now. Then we have something like on demand. It's maybe complex project, but not really super high risk. And then traditional, let's say, research publication work with is like very low risk, and most of that assessment can be done really by the researchers themselves when they are trained and they have tool to choose the right license. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacek. That's great. And we'll try to make these slides available afterwards. Next up, we have Collin. Collin, you ready? Amazing. It's very hard to do. All right, here you go.
All right, thank you. Start my own timer. I'm Collin Capano. I'm the director of the Open Source Program Office at Syracuse University. Briefly, quickly about Syracuse. So Syracuse is a city in upstate New York. I have found when you tell Europeans, you mention New York, they think New York City. We're not in New York City. New York City is down there. This distance is about the distance from here to Cardiff. So unless you people here think you're Welsh, we're not the same. We're a private R1 university. I would say we're about a medium-sized university, about 23,000 students, 16,000 undergrad, 7,000 grad. And again, perhaps too much of a digression given my time, but one other thing about Syracuse, since we're in Ireland, a large number of Irish immigrants settled in Syracuse in the 1800s, and the Irish neighborhood there is called Tipperary Hill. In the 1920s, when the city went to install traffic lights, the locals got very upset that British red was above Irish green, so they broke the light. So the city installed a new light. They broke it again. This kept on going back and forth. Eventually, the city gave up and just flipped the traffic light upside down. And so if you go there, it's still there. It's the only traffic light in the United States where green is on top. And they even have a statue devoted to it. So there you go, open source traffic management. The locals had an issue. They filed a pull request. It was accepted. All right, so actually about our OSPO, as a common theme here, we're small. It's just 2 of us, myself, the director, and then Will Gertie, who is my postdoc. He's very good. You should see him around. You should talk to him. We were formed in 2023 with a grant from the Sloan Foundation. And our mission, as with the others, is to promote and sustain the use of open source software and, in general, open science on campus and in the greater Syracuse region. So initially we were under the Office of Research. This was because that initial grant that we were funded with, the Vice President of Research was the PI on that grant. But we quickly realized a better fit for us was to be in our School of Information Studies, or iSchool. And so we're now actually physically located there. That's where our offices are. I'm now an affiliate faculty in the iSchool. I should mention I'm actually a research professor in physics as my academic appointment. I come from a physics background, but I now also have joint appointment in the iSchool. And our renewal grant, which was just awarded in November, so thank you, Sloan, is now administered by the iSchool. So this affiliate faculty is kind of like a honorary thing, but my actual academic appointment may be moving to the iSchool in the next couple of years. We don't have a lot of tech transfer going on at Syracuse. We don't have as much of a startup culture in the area as like someplace like Stanford might. But we're more focused on education and research. So our largest initiative is a student open source software development program. So basically we accept project ideas from faculty, then we will find a student to work with that faculty to say make their code more open source, and then we will pay the student and we'll provide technical support. We also have our own projects, our own OSPO-led projects. These are mostly focused on, because it's hot right now, AI and using open weight LLMs. And to date, we funded 16 projects totaling 19 students. We also organize workshops and seminars on campus, again, to increase that education component. In the next couple of years, we're really going to be focused on trying to become a permanent part of the university, a sustainable part of the university. One way that we're looking to do that was to transition this internship program to an academic course. So instead of us paying the students, effectively the students are paying us because, they're paying money to go to school, and they'll get credit and a grade. And this is modeled on a very good program that's done by the St. Louis University OSPO, which I think they're talking about in the other room. We're also looking at maybe converting this into like some of our workshops into a full-on RSE course, and you can imagine this as a two-track. I have 5 minutes. Wow, great. A two-track course structure. And again, this will should hopefully make it more financially sustainable. We do still plan, though, to continue those OSPO-led projects. We do try and do research ourselves, and so we will still have that going on, and that will be paid, but it'll be much smaller. It'll be maybe a couple of students a year, and they'll be on GAs or RAs, and we'll fund that with grants that we apply for from, say, NSF or the other federal sources or private. Continuing on with that theme of sustainability, one of the things that we also need to figure out the next few years is what the director position, what my position will be in the university. One interesting thing, we actually have, the university has pegged funds for funding my position, so it's actually not so much a funding question, but more a political question. Ideally, the position would be something that if a new administration comes in, the OSPO will still be able to remain, because even though our current administration is supportive of it, in academia, you never know. New dean, new provost comes in, forget it, all bets are off. So it would be ideal to find a position that would insulate against that. So we're considering 4 possibilities that we're looking at over the next few years. Ideal would be a tenure track faculty position in the iSchool, because that comes with the most intellectual and academic freedom. So if a new administration comes in, and they say, we don't like the OSPO, I could say, well, too bad. That's followed by some of these others. But again, this is there's a lot of difficulties, particularly political issues with trying to get support for a tenure track position. It's a whole digression thing that I can tell you about. The other big thing that is a huge concern for me is actually a funding issue, and that is to support my postdoc and hopefully turn it into a permanent position in the university, because I've quickly found an OSPO of just one person does not work. This would not work without 2 people, so I need to be able to find funding for him. So how are we going to do that? We're looking at largely three different funding possibilities. One is just applying directly for grants from the federal government, from private institutions. The other is faculty overhead. So when faculty apply for grants, that they either explicitly include a line item in their budget for the OSPO, or we're able to take from the university overhead. And we've actually had a couple of faculty from our internship program volunteer, would you like me to add you to our budget? And we're like, yes, that'd be lovely. So that's where the internship thing nicely ties into that. And then third thing is this kind of a moonshot. I don't think it's really going to work, but you know, if it works, great. I said we've been doing research and developing our own stuff. If one of those things that we develop actually proves to be useful, you could imagine us offering this, doing like software as a service and collecting some sort of income from that. There's a lot of hurdles to that. I don't know if that will really work, but it's something that we're considering. But we plan to explore all these options as we integrate. So that's everything I want to say about us. There's a QR code that will take you to our website there, which is opensource.syracuse.edu. If you'd also like to shoot us an email, ospo@syr.edu, or just come find me and talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Collin. That's great. Yay, 2 mics. Woohoo. Next we have Marvin. Yeah, I'll take a picture.
Thank you, buddy.
You want me to use your phone to take a photo? I could do that. Marvin, I believe this is you, right?
Yeah, good old MGB branding.
All right. Good luck. Take it away.
Hi, how you doing? Oh, is this on? Yeah, there we go. Hi, my name is Marvin Barksdale. I'm at Mass General Brigham. I serve as the Director of Digital Business Development and Innovation, which is our tech transfer office. For those not familiar, MGB is an integrated academic medical system that comprises of 2 large academic medical centers, a few specialty hospitals like Mass Eye and Ear, Spalding Rehab, about 82,000 employees, the largest employer in the state of Massachusetts. We've got about a $2 billion research spend a year. So absolutely massive institution. As I have talked about before, I'm a member of the innovation team. My background is in the law. I have bounced around from Meta and also in our digital supply chain before here, but really found a great space with a great group of innovative leaders. So my first task here was, and this is more, just give you background, it's more of an origin story than I think the other presentations. We've been in stealth mode for about 6 months, just dealing with our PIs on a one-on-one basis. And then we've just went live February 1st and kind of forward facing to the public. This slide talks about our purview, which is scientific publications, which in my experience has really been like the linchpin and a focus of a lot of our researchers. They want that Nature publication. And as many of you know, in the world of open access, proper licensing is paramount. Our second kind of area of focus is open research data, and third is open source software like in source code. Just kind of skipping to the overall point here, what we've done is basically talk to innovation whose initial scope was out licensing, and well, we're basically like my team is a bi-directional deal team, meaning we do licenses out and co-developments in, which normally result in a license, basically expanding our purview to open source licenses beyond the proprietary licenses that we normally do. It's one of my favorite slides because it really focuses on why open science is important in clinical research. Our MGB researchers apply for NIH funding. NIH applications trigger our internal policies, which allow researchers to share the products of their research according to NIH requirements. NIH policy mandates open access, open data, and open source. I say with a star because they recommend OSI licenses, but there's been some talk behind the scenes that that's going to be a mandate. Regardless, this is the kind of world of open science as it connects to NIH research. Our challenge for MGB was balancing this open requirements with our requirements for control and risk management, and also we're a TTO, so commercialization. But I think a really important point earlier was we look at commercialization as because we're a nonprofit, so I'm not just speaking the company line, but we look at commercialization as an opportunity to get the software in the hand of patients and physicians. But our challenge is to balance this open requirements with control. When I talk about the risk, like the risk elements, I won't go through all of these, but as as a part of when I put on my other hat, I'm negotiating a lot of licenses, and in our kind of proprietary licenses, these are the areas that we're trying to balance. These are kind of like the areas of risk. So so the challenge again was, how do we execute open science throughout the system, but also be mindful of these risk areas? So it was my job to pitch innovation and say, like, why is this even important? And I think a lot of OSPOs deal with this. Why? Like, you're trying to talk to senior leadership about why is this important to think of. So what I focused on is we are the largest between Mass General Hospital and Brigham and Women's, our two academic hospitals. We are the largest, the driver of NIH funding in the country. So then I went to my research department and I pulled out my software projects, and I was able to gather that over the past 10 years, we raised $77 million in what should have been open source, open source projects based on NIH requirements. But the problem was, it was like it was the wild, wild west. Like, we didn't really know where these projects were, like whether they're on GitHub, were researchers even compliant? So kind of my next step after like establishing this is a need, and this has a very high kind of risk component for the system in terms of losing funding, was to really do an assessment of kind of how big the reach was like throughout the system. So I copied a script written by like the USP OSPO, kind of redeveloped it. So instead of universities, it was our specific kind of hospitals, and I gathered really similar kind of data to some of the other OSPOs that you've seen. There's a lot of none, a lot of MIT, some Apache, some GPL. So the problem, as stated, was year over year over the past 3 years, we've been about $11 million in NIH funding that's supposed to go to software. And that should remain in compliance. But now I have my general counsel office who ideally say, hey, we'd love to align the open source licenses that we use, which are with our proprietary licenses. And let me skip to the point here. That's pretty much impossible, but we think we got close as possible. Also, that there's a range of open science activities. I talked about the open access and the requirements and the desire to get published. These researchers, some of them aren't as driven to build an open source community in the traditional sense. They're really interested in complying with Nature and NIH and getting published. So we saw open science happening in kind of different flavors. Our historical solutions was, let's just use a close enough license, or let's draft a custom license. And I think that both of those solutions were inadequate. So we developed our MGB Open Science Program Office approach that was built upon kind of our internal policies. We built a MGB Open Science License Library kind of on top of those policies. And then our Open Science Program Office kind of serves as the front door. In kind of pitching the system on this idea, we touched the really four important pillars of the system. You know, we tried to provide value both to our core area, which is in innovation in the quote unquote TTO, developing research best practices, to our legal OGC. They were really concerned with analyzing and proper licensing. And then for our digital organization, which frankly was pretty anti-open source, they ended up coming back around when it came to inner source licensing. And talk more about that later, but I know I got 2 minutes. This is just basically a quick visual overview of the Open Science Program Offices. We have a kind of catch-all email, our Open Science Library, and our kind of goals are compliance and commercialization. I won't go too deep into this, but there are reasons, and I know we have a licensing kind of talk later. These are the two most popular in the system. The MIT, this is the MIT license in full. It just did not have the detail that we required, didn't have some of the commercialization elements that we liked. Apache 2.0, I loved, but the patent grant for a company that spends $1.5 million in patent administration every year, having this wide language that gives you right to all the to all the claims that are infringed by the original software is just too wide of an umbrella for MGB to accept. I can go into detail if anybody wants to talk further about that. This is a little bit of an overall schematic about how we built the licenses. The things in red are things that we came into really passionate about that in working with the OSI we realized weren't really possible. But I'll skip to the end here and where we ended up with these 4 licenses. We have our MGB open source 1.0 licenses, which is a AI model compatible permissive open source license with AMC risk management provisions, requires attribution, huge part of what we want to accomplish. We think that attribution is critical in open source. I mean, like, you're not passing dollars, you're looking to gain prominence in the academic community. If you don't have proper attribution, I think you're losing. Open access, which is our non-commercial redistribution, our source available, which is anti-code forking, and our inner source. We've had, over the past 6 months, we've had great success and really just great feedback from our research community. We built this open science library kind of schematic so my licensing managers who are under me can kind of work closely and kind of take our like researchers through the process of deciding what's better for your purpose. This is the last slide, and this is basically our program office homepage. It's on GitHub. It's live. It has each one of our licenses. It has explainers in these. It's just at MGB at GitHub, MGB-Open Science-Program Office. I can give that to anyone interested in the licenses that especially have clinical research at their OSPOs, at their institutions. Happy to talk about if this can be helpful for you.